Good morning. Today we are going to be learning how to write equations from tables. All right, here we have our table. And remember, we have our equation is always y in the form of y equals mx plus b. Remember, m is our slope. Okay, so I'm going to put that in parentheses for you. And b is your y-intercept. Okay, remember your y-intercept is when x is equal to 0. Okay, so to find my y-intercept, I am going to see when x is 0, and then that's my y value. So I'm going to highlight when x is 0. So when x is 0, my y value is 3. So that means my y-intercept is 3. Okay? So when x is 0, it's 3. So my y-intercept is 3. Okay? Now I'm going to work on my slope, which is my change in y over change in x. So I'm going to put that over here. Change in y over change in x. So first I'm going to see the change in my y value. So to go from 3 to 7, I'm adding 4. From 7 to 11, adding 4. And 11 to 15, I'm adding 4. So my change in y is plus 4. Okay, so we know it's positive. To go from 0 to 1 is 1. 1 to 2, 1. 2 to 3, 1. So my change in x is 1. I want this in its simplest form. And 4 over 1 in its simplest form is 4, because 4 divided by 1 is 4. So my slope is 4. Now I'm going to write my equation. My equation is in the form of y equals mx plus b. So I must have y equals. My m is 4, so I'm going to substitute the 4x, plus my y-intercept, which is 3. So instead of b, I'm going to put 3. So my equation is y equals 4x plus 3. Here's my m, here's my b. Last but not least, we are going to figure out if this is proportional or non-proportional. This table is non-proportional. And it's non-proportional because my b does not equal 0. I have a y-intercept. I have a different starting point. My starting point isn't 0, 0. Okay? So it's non-proportional because my y-intercept does not equal 0. Now, let's take a look at example B, right? So first, let's find our slope. Okay, so we have change in y over change in x. I'm going to find my change in y first. So to go from 12 to 9, I'm subtracting 3. From 9 to 6, still subtracting 3. 6 to 3, subtracting 3. So we know our slope is negative because every time our x increases, our y value decreases. So when your x increases, your y value decreases, it's negative. So I have -3, okay, as my change in y. My change in x from 2 to 3 is 1. 3 to 4 plus 1. 4 to 5 plus 1. So -3 over 1 is -3. So my slope is -3. Okay. Now, if you notice here, I need to find my y-intercept, but I don't see when x is 0 on my table. So that means I need to go backwards and do the opposite of this pattern. So if my pattern for my slope here on my table is to go down 3 for every 1, I need to go backwards until I get to 0. So I would subtract 1 here. That'll give me 1. Then if I subtract 1 again, that'll give me 0. right? So I'm going to do the opposite. Okay, so since I subtracted 3, I'm going to add 3. So 12 plus 3 is 15. But as many times as I go back on my x, I need to go back on my y. So I need to go back again, add 3 again, and I have 18. So my y-intercept is 18. Okay, I had to go back twice, and I had to go back twice. You do the opposite. Okay, so I did the opposite of subtracting 3, so that when you go back and you have your table, it follows the same pattern. So now that I have my slope is -3, my y-intercept is 18. So I'm going to substitute in those values. Remember, it's y equals mx plus b. Okay, so I have y is equal to -3x plus 18, which makes this non-proportional because my y-intercept does not equal 0. And if you need to see the visual, I have highlighted my y-intercepts here. Okay. So remember, for non-proportional, it's y equals mx plus b, but for proportional, it's y equals mx because your b would be 0. Okay. Now we're gonna go ahead and look at one last example. Let's make sure we got it. Okay. So I'm gonna find my slope, which is changing y over changing x. Okay, changing y over changing x. I always start with my y value. Remember, on tables, your y value is on the right and at the bottom. So to go from 10 to 4, I am subtracting 6. To go from 4 to -2 is subtracting 6, and -2 to -8 is subtracting 6. So my change in y is -6. To go from -3 to -1, I'm adding 2. -1 to 1 plus 2. And 1 to 3 is plus 2. All right, so my change in x is 2. -6 over 2 simplifies to -3. So my slope is -3. Now notice I need to find my y-intercept. And I need to figure out when x is 0, it's my y. Okay? I need to get to where my x value is 0. So I know that 0 will be between 1 and -1. So instead of going back by 2, I'm going to go back by 1. Okay? So I'm going to go backwards 1. So that means I'm going to subtract. So I know my slope is -6 over 2. But when I simplify, that gives me -3 over 1. Okay, so that's -3 over 1. So for every 1, I go back 3, which is -3. Okay, so this time I'm only going back once instead of 2. So instead of going back 6, I'm going to go back 3. So I'm going to add 3 here. I'm going to add 3 inside, because if this is 0, I need to figure out what my x value is, what my y value is when my x value is 0. So I have -2 plus 3, because remember we have to go backwards, and then that gives me 1. Okay, so my y-intercept is 1. So my equation will be y equals -3x plus 1, which makes this non-proportional. And one more way that you can check your to make sure your y-intercept is correct and your equation is correct, you can substitute a value from your table in. So just as a quick example, my equation is y equals -3x plus 1. So let's say I use the x value of 1. So I have y equals negative 3 times 1 plus 1. Negative 3 times 1 gives me negative 3 plus 1. And y equals negative 2. And here, y equals negative 2. So you see your equation does work. Now you're going to go ahead and complete your assignment for today.